after 10 o'clock at night. I hope I'm not cutting the top of my head off. I don't have anybody here with me. It's after 10 o'clock at night and I'm getting ready to go to bed, but I need to make some sandwich bread because we're all out. Now I found this great recipe, and it's a sourdough recipe, so if you're all into sourdough, this is an awesome sandwich bread recipe. It comes out really soft and airy. It's not dense at all. But in order to do that, I need to feed my starter. Now this starter is the scraps from what I used the last time I made this bread. There's not much in here. And it's been sitting in the refrigerator for probably 2 weeks. I make 2 loaves of bread at a time. So this has been sitting in the fridge about 2 weeks. I just took it out. We're going to feed it up and leave it until morning, and then we will make the bread. So in here I have about 50 grams of starter, and I'm going to use my scale. Let's move you guys in just a little bit here. This is a scale I got from Walmart, and I just dripped some stuff on there from the starter. But there's about 50 grams of starter in here, so I'm going to put it on the scale, and I'm going to zero it out. And I'm going to add 150 grams of warm water, just because this was cold. It was in the refrigerator. So I'm going to put 150 grams of water. Okay, 151, close enough. And I'm gonna mix that up really well. Help dissolve some of the starter that's hardened on the sides of the container. And guys, I'm not joking when I say this is a great recipe. Eddie loves this bread so much. He eats some every single night with our homemade jellies. And he has never been a person to eat jelly, but he'll do anything to eat this bread. Okay, now we're gonna re-zero that out, and we're gonna add 150 grams of all-purpose flour. $151, same as the water. Good enough. So we're just gonna stir that flour in really good now. This is going to give me 300 and approximately 50 grams of activated starter in the morning, or active starter. And I've had this starter going probably about a year. So it's a very healthy and active starter, even though it sits in the refrigerator for weeks at a time. There was actually a point where I didn't touch it for a month, and I just fed it up and it did a great job. I have a line here. It's kind of washing off a little bit. But that's how much starter is in that container right now. It's right up to here. Now when I get up in the morning, this is going to be all the way up to the top. Good morning, everyone. It is 7 a.m. and we need to start making the bread. Pretty simple recipe, but it does take time. I like to start this at 7 so that it's done by dinner time. It's going to take that long. It's not all hands-on though, so it really is easy to make. I can make this bread and still go outside and weed the garden or whatever I need to do. So let's get started. First thing we're going to do is weigh out. We have our scale. We're going to zero it out with the bowl on there. We're going to weigh out 300 grams of our starter, which is nice and bubbly and ready to go. So we're going to put in 300 grams of this, which will be most of it. Alright, we've got 300 grams of starter. And we're just going to put this empty container, it looks empty, we're going to put this back in the refrigerator for next time.
There's our 300 grams of starter. I'm going to zero out the scale, and we're going to add 650 grams of warm water. Now we're going to mix this all together. Take it off the scale. Now you're not really trying to dissolve the starter. You're just trying to, I don't know, incorporate it into the water so that once you put your flour in, it will spread out into all of the flour. So we'll just give that a little mix. Okay, now we need 1,000 grams of bread flour. All right, now we need 50 grams of oil. So 50 grams of any kind of oil, sunflower oil, canola oil. Now we need 40 grams of sugar. You could use sugar or honey, any kind of sweetener. Okay, 40 grams. And we're going to do 20 grams of kosher salt. Now, if all you have is table salt, use 10 grams. But we're going to do 20 grams of kosher salt. We're going to mix this up a little bit. Incorporate all that water into the flour. All right. I don't see any water sitting on the bottom, so now I'm going to mix this up by hand. And you want to mix this for a good minute or two. You want to make sure everything is really, really mixed in there. I like to grab it and squeeze it through my fingers, just trying to mash everything together. And we're not trying to knead it. It's not going to come out smooth. It is going to be extremely sticky. And that's what we want. Okay, guys, what we're going to do now is we're just going to cover this up and set a timer for 30 minutes. All right, we're back. As you can see, the dough has not actually changed any. It's still pretty shaggy looking, but it's been 30 minutes. So what we're going to do now is we're going to do what is called a stretch and fold. And the best way to do that is to get your hands wet. Just lift up on the dough, stretch it, and plop it back down. That's all we're going to do. And we're going to go all the way around the bowl. A couple times. Just pick it up and fold it over. And then, I don't know about anybody else, but when I do this, after I've gone around the bowl once, it just doesn't stretch as much. So that's where I call it good. And we'll leave it for another 30 minutes. The timer has gone off for the second time. This is our second stretch and fold. So altogether we've been here about an hour and 15 minutes. The dough still has not changed much. As you can see, it's still shaggy, but we're going to do the same thing again. Wet hand so that the dough doesn't stick as much, and we are going to stretch and fold again. You want to stretch it out as much as you can without breaking it. Get my hands wet again. I normally do this right next to the sink so I can just stick my hands in the sink to re-wet them. Okay, and you can see it's getting a lot harder to stretch it. So I pretty much just go around the bowl once. And now we will let this set for another 30 minutes. And altogether we're going to do this stretch and fold 4 times. I have been on a quest to find a really good sandwich bread recipe. And I've tried a lot of the yeast breads, and it's probably my fault because I'm not experienced, but the breads would come out too dense to want to use them for a sandwich, because 2 pieces of that bread would just feel way too thick for a sandwich. So I've gone through a lot of recipes that I have found online, and this may not be the last one, but this one does make a really good sandwich. And this recipe makes 2 loaves, and I can leave one out and then put one in the freezer, so they'll last us usually at least a week. Depends on how much Eddie eats. Like I said, he loves this bread so much, he'll come in every night before bed, make himself a piece of toast with some jelly. He just loves the bread, and it does make a really good sandwich bread. But I'm going to leave a link to her recipe down in the description, and you can go and check out her video or her website. I can't remember which it was, but I'll leave it down in the description and you can go take a look. All right, here we go, guys. The 3rd stretch and fold, same as before, and you can see it's getting a little bit smoother. It's definitely not as shaggy as when it started. Definitely can't stretch it as much now. The hardest part is keeping your bowl down on the counter when you're trying to stretch it. Okay, and that's it. That's all I'm going to get out of it, because it's definitely getting harder to stretch. Okay, we're going to do one more stretch and fold in 30 minutes. Okay, we're going to do the last stretch and fold. It's definitely smoother than it was when we started. And that's about all we're going to get. One time around the bowl. Okay, I'm just making sure the dough is sort of in the middle of the bowl here. Now, what I'm going to do, this was our last stretch and fold. I'm going to cover it with the lid and with a towel. And this is just to keep it nice and warm. And I'm going to set a timer on my phone. Okay, timer. We're going to set the timer for 3 hours so that I can go out and work in the garden. I actually have some plants I need to uppot. So it's not going to fill up the bowl like you would expect with a yeast bread, but what will happen is it will rise a little bit and it will kind of get bubbly, full of air. You'll be able to tell the difference. The first time I made this, I thought, well, I'm never going to know the difference if it's ready or not, but you'll see a difference. You'll be able to tell that it has some air in it. So we're just going to let this sit for 3 hours while I go work in the greenhouse uppotting some plants, and I'll come back when my timer goes off. All right, guys, my timer went off. I actually gave it 4 hours just because I was busy. I uppotted a bunch of plants and then I mowed the lawn, and so here we are. I haven't looked yet. Let's see what this looks like. Okay, so you don't see a whole lot of difference, but you can see there's a big bubble right there and there's a bubble there. So we're going to call it good. We're going to shape this into the loaves now, and then we're going to let it rise in the pans. So the first thing I need to do is set you guys down. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I have this butter flavored non-stick spray stuff, and I'm going to spray my pans. Okay, pans are ready. Now we're going to flour the counter. So we're going to put quite a bit of flour on the counter just so it doesn't stick. Let me bring you guys closer here. All right, now we're going to pour the dough out onto the counter, but we want this top side to be down on the counter. So we're going to try to get it out quick and flip it over and scrape it all out of the bowl. It does stick to the bowl, so if you had a rubber scraper, that would work really well. I don't have one. Okay, there we go. Now we're going to cut this in half because we're making 2 loaves. And it's very, very sticky. Move this one off to the side a little bit. Okay, so we're going to work with this half right now. We have a pan for it. Now what we're going to do, we don't want to push all the air bubbles out of it. So we're just going to stretch and fold it into the middle. Stretch and fold it over. Now we don't want a whole bunch of flour on it because then it won't stick to itself. So now we're going to take this side, we're going to stretch, fold it into the middle, take the other side, stretch, fold it over, and it should all stick to itself. Now, what I like to do to make sure that it's nice and tight is I will take, I don't know if you guys can see this, I'll take the 2 sides of it here and sort of cross it over. Just try to make this as tight as I can get it. And then I will also pinch the ends together. Sometimes it doesn't come out as tight as I want, and then I'll just kind of stitch it together some more. I mean, this one looks good, so I'm not going to worry about it. Okay, now we have our pan. This is the trickiest part right here. And sometimes I don't do very well. But we're going to scoop it up, and then we're going to flip it over into the pan so that the floured side is up. So we're going to scoop it up and then flip it into the pan. And then we're just going to tuck the ends down, make sure it fits in there nicely. You can brush off all that extra flour. I kind of scooped up a little bit too much flour in that. There. So there is one. Now let's bring over the rest of the dough here. And you could use your bench scraper, get underneath it, pull and fold, pull and fold, turn it around if you'd like, and then pull and fold. I much prefer doing it with my hands because then I'm not scooping up all that flour that I put on the counter. So you can see it's not sticking as well because I scooped up all that flour that was on the counter. So I'm going to stretch and fold, make sure it all sticks to itself, pinch the ends together, and now we're going to stitch to give it some tension. The more tension you have on this bread, the better. So, but anybody can do this. This is a super easy recipe for a beginner. Trust me, I haven't been making bread all that long, so okay, that looks good. Again, we're going to scoop it up and get my pan out of my way, and we're going to flip it over into the pan, and then we'll just kind of scoot it in there so that it fills up the pan nice and evenly. And that's it. So now what I do, I know you guys won't have this, but I have these vegetable bags that I use for bagging up some of our satsumas to sell. So I use these. I find the end here. And I'm going to slide these pans right into these bags. And because the flour is on the top, they won't stick. But what I do now, I don't just like stick it in there and have it flat, because this bread is going to rise up above the edge of the pan. So I just let a little bit of air in there, fold it over, and then you have like this bubble or balloon above the bread so that the bread can rise up without any problem. We're going to get some air in there, tuck it underneath, and there you have the 2 loaves with their little bubbles on top. So now we're going to let this set. It should be 2.5 hours. It really depends on your temperature, on all of your rise times. If it's cooler in your kitchen, it will take longer. If it's warmer, it might not take as long. So basically you just have to keep an eye on things. Now when the dough was in the bowl, I was just looking for some bubbles to appear on the top so that I knew it was fermenting really good. Now on this, this isn't yeast bread. You don't want this dough to rise high above the pan. You want it to be, I don't know, maybe 1/2 inch, a little more above the top of the pan, but really not much. So about 2.5 hours. It's pretty warm today. So about 2.5 hours, I'm going to come back and we're going to put these in the oven. Well, I don't know what the problem is today. My bread has been sitting here for probably about 3 hours, and it has not risen to the height that it is supposed to, or the height that it usually does. It definitely has risen, but it normally will get up even with the top of the pan. 30 minutes before your dough is ready, which that's always hard to tell, right? You don't know when 30 minutes before it's ready is going to be. But 30 minutes before you're ready to cook it, you need to start your oven. So I'm going to start mine, and you start it on 400 degrees. I'm going to put this pan, this cookie sheet here, I'm going to put this upside down in the oven and put the loaf pans on top of it. I'm going to put this pan in the stove while it's preheating, and I'm going to put about 2 cups of water in it and just set that on the bottom rack in the oven. And then I'm going to put this pan in here so that one can get preheated. Alright guys, the oven is preheated and we're getting ready to put this bread in. You can see it rose up a little bit more. It would probably rise even more if I left it, but they're flush with the top of the pan, and it's getting late. I need to make dinner, so I need to get these in the oven. Now for our secret ingredient to make these rise up and be great, a spray bottle of water. So we're just going to spray the top of the bread like that, and we're going to put it in the oven. Now in 15 minutes, I'm going to take that pan of water out of the oven, and I'm going to let them finish cooking for about another 15 minutes. Sometimes my stove doesn't seem as hot as other times. So what I'm going to do is, after that 15 minutes, I'll take the pan of water out and I'm going to stick a thermometer into the center of one of my loaves. When that thermometer hits 195 degrees, the bread is done. Take it out, flip it out of the pan, rub some butter on the top, and let it cool.
Well, there we go, guys. 2 great loaves of sandwich bread. They didn't rise as much as they normally do, but you know, that's the way it is with bread. Sometimes it rises more, sometimes it doesn't. You just never know what you're going to get. But trust me, this is very good bread, and you should definitely give the recipe a try. And don't forget, I'm going to leave the link down in the description of where I got this recipe so you can see a professional baker make this bread.